Story 1. Once upon a time, there was an abandoned prison hidden deep within a dense forest. This prison had a sinister reputation, filled with terrifying stories of murders, tortures, and unresolved mysteries. The elders said that the tormented souls of the deceased prisoners still haunted the dark corridors of the facility, seeking vengeance against those who had wrongfully imprisoned them. A group of bold adventurers decided to defy the danger and explore this cursed prison. Among them were Sarah, a skeptic convinced that ghosts existed only in people's imagination, and Alex, a paranormal enthusiast who firmly believed in wandering spirits. Upon their arrival, an oppressive atmosphere enveloped the group, as if the prison walls themselves were whispering silent warnings. Ignoring the obvious signs of danger, they ventured deeper into the bowels of the facility. As they advanced through the dark corridors, strange noises began to echo around them. Chains rattled as if shaken by an invisible force, and unsettling whispers seemed to float in the air, though no one was visible. Suddenly, an invisible force pushed Sarah into a dark cell and locked the door behind her. Panicked, she desperately searched for a way out, but the walls seemed to close in around her, suffocating her in darkness. Meanwhile, the rest of the group found themselves trapped in an overgrown inner courtyard where the anonymous graves of deceased prisoners lay silent. Moving shadows seemed to slink between the tombstones, while ghostly voices whispered long-forgotten names. Night fell, and with it, an indescribable terror enveloped the prison. Paranormal phenomena occurred at an alarming rate. Doors slammed shut on their own, flickering lights illuminated spectral figures, and mournful wails echoed through the empty corridors. Determined to unravel the mystery of this haunted prison, Alex decided to explore the lower levels of the facility, where the worst atrocities were said to have been committed. Armed with a voice recorder and a flashlight, he plunged into the oppressive darkness alone. As he advanced through the darkness, Alex felt a malevolent presence closely following him. Unintelligible murmurs resonated in his mind, whispering sinister warnings and veiled threats. But he pressed on courageously, determined to uncover the truth. Eventually, he arrived at an isolated cell covered in esoteric symbols and bloody graffiti. The air was imbued with a dark and oppressive energy, and Alex felt a wave of icy terror wash over him as he approached. Suddenly, a hoarse and distorted voice rose from the shadows, filling the room with its sinister presence. It was the spirit of a former prisoner, wrongfully convicted of a crime he did not commit, condemned to wander the prison corridors eternally in search of justice. Terrified but determined, Alex engaged in conversation with the tormented spirit, seeking to soothe his anger and release his soul from eternal torment. For hours they spoke in the darkness, exchanging stories of life and death, sin and redemption. Finally, the spirit seemed to find peace, and with a final sigh, it dissipated into the air, leaving behind an aura of calm and tranquility. Alex remained there, alone in the darkness, pondering the events of the night and the unresolved mysteries of the haunted prison. At dawn, the group reunited, exhausted but unharmed, outside the walls of the abandoned prison. They had survived a terrifying night of supernatural horror, but the memories of this experience would remain etched in their minds forever, haunting them for the rest of their days. Story 2. In a high-security prison whose concrete walls seemed to breathe fear and despair, resided the most dangerous criminals of the nation. Nestled in the heart of a dense and dark forest, this prison was a place where even the sounds of nature seemed stifled by the weight of the guilt that prevailed. One stormy evening, as lightning streaked across the darkened sky and thunder roared like the voice of divine wrath, a group of inmates was gathered in the prison yard for their hour of recreation. Among them was Max, a man with a dark and mysterious past, convicted of crimes he refused to acknowledge. As rain pounded the courtyard floor, and the wind howled fiercely through the cell bars, a strange glow suddenly appeared on the horizon. The inmates watched in fascination as this glow drew closer, transforming into a dark and menacing silhouette that blended into the night's darkness. Intrigued but wary, Max approached the silhouette, feeling a strange pulsation in the air that sent shivers down his spine. When the silhouette finally materialized before him, he was seized by an indescribable terror upon recognizing the face of his most recent victim, a man he had sworn never to see again. The dead man gave him a sinister smile, his eyes shining with a supernatural gleam that seemed to pierce Max's soul. Without a word, he reached out towards him, revealing a gaping wound in place of his palm, from which emanated a dark and terrifying glow. In a panic, Max recoiled violently, but it was too late. The dead man grabbed him by the arm, dragging him into the darkness of the night, where the inmates' screams mingled with the howls of the unleashed wind. Meanwhile, inside the prison, lights flickered and alarms blared, plunging the guards into a state of confusion and panic. They knew that something terrible was happening, but they could not identify the source of this creeping terror that infiltrated every corner of the facility. As the inmates screamed in terror and despair, an invisible force seemed to push them towards a grim fate, pulling them deeper into the bowels of the prison where darkness reigned supreme and the darkest secrets were buried. In the hours that followed, strange and inexplicable events occurred throughout the prison. Doors closed on their own, sinister shadows haunted the corridors, and mournful voices whispered warnings of imminent death. The guards, overwhelmed by the situation, desperately tried to maintain order, but they were powerless against the demonic forces that seemed to have invaded the facility. Some of them claimed to have seen ghostly apparitions in the cells, while others claimed to have heard heartbreaking cries in the empty corridors. The night seemed to last forever, and every moment was filled with unspeakable terror that seemed to feed on the fear and anguish of the inmates and guards. But as dawn finally broke on the horizon, the prison was strangely calm, as if the darkness itself had finally found its rest. However, Max was never found, and his fate remained a mystery to all who had survived that infernal night. Some said he was carried away by the shadows, while others claimed he was condemned to wander for eternity in the depths of the prison, haunted by the ghosts of his victims. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. That night, the high-security prison had unleashed dark forces that should never have been disturbed, and those who had survived that night of terror knew they would never be the same.